of Missy Bevers.
Murdered 1 year ago in the church just behind me.
According to the search warrant, Midlothian police have seized a woman's white shirt, size XXL, that Missy Bevers.
Hey everyone. In the early morning of April 18th, 2016, Missy Bevers, a wife and mother of 3, was brutally attacked and killed in Creekside Church of Christ, located in Midlothian, Texas. She arrived at the church at 4:16 a.m. to set up for a 5 o'clock fitness class that she led. The motion-activated cameras inside the church first captured Missy entering the building around 4:20, and it wasn't until 5 a.m. when 2 911 calls were made to Midlothian Police Department from a couple of the class attendees. When police and EMTs arrived, the 45-year-old was pronounced deceased. The cause of her death is reportedly due to puncture wounds in the head and torso area, while official reports also suggest a gun was used. Later, when surveillance footage was viewed by investigators, police witnessed the only footage of the killer they have still to this day. At around 3:50 a.m., someone broke into the church in full SWAT or tactical gear with the word police on their clothing, and can be seen on the church's cameras breaking windows and doors haphazardly with what looks to be a hammer and possibly a crowbar. The suspect did not carry bags with them, so most people believe their intention was not a burglary at all. In fact, the police said nothing seemed to be taken from the property. It is widely believed the killer smashed some windows and broke into a few locked rooms to stage the scene as a burglary gone wrong. And since the suspect was fully disguised in tactical clothing with helmet and all, as well as the time this took place, the murder was likely premeditated. Someone knew Missy would be in that church early in the morning setting up for her workout, but how would anyone know when and where this woman would be at any given time, apart from members of the class and close friends and family? Well, that's where social media comes in. As we all know, the digital age promotes less and less privacy as time moves forward. Find yourself at a great restaurant or movie screening at a local theater? Why not check in and let everyone know what you're up to? Missy Bevers was very active on social media, even posting about not canceling the workout due to bad weather the night before her tragic death. The fact is, Missy could have been targeted by numerous individuals leading up to that fateful day in April. But ultimately, like in any investigation, there is always a core group of suspects to look into first and ultimately clear. So let's try to do just that and see if we can narrow down some of the most popular theories. In pretty much all true crime movies and TV shows, you always hear the same thing. If a woman is killed, 90% of the time the spouse did it, and vice versa. Well, let's go ahead and start with our first potential suspect. Brandon Bevers was Missy's husband, and the father of Missy's 3 children. Right off the bat, Brandon was 600 miles away during the time of the murder, going on a fishing trip in Mississippi. Cell phone tower data and flight records align with and prove his alibi was legit. And if you look at the killer walking around the church and compare the build and body type of Brandon Bevers, it seems pretty clear they are not one and the same. Continuing on, however, we should discuss a little bit of info that came to light as a result of multiple search warrants in the progressing investigation. Police contact Brandon and notify him that his wife was found deceased in Creekside Church. By his own statement, Brandon never asked investigators what happened to her, which is interesting to say the least, because I think most people would agree the first thing they would say in response to such tragic news is what? What happened? I mean, this is just me personally, but when one of my dogs start looking at me weird, or vomits because they ate a little grass outside, I am almost already on the phone calling the vet asking questions. Obviously, that's a different scenario altogether, but think to yourself how you might react to the news of your physically fit, healthy spouse being found deceased at your church while you're in another state fishing. Moving forward, Brandon Bevers never shied away from the press. You can watch multiple interviews with him, his father, and reporters right here on YouTube. In fact, while talking to the press, Brandon was told by the media the police had just released in a search warrant Missy's cause of death, to which Brandon replied with something like, "Don't tell me, that will put me over the edge." Police never told him exact details of what happened. The reason for this is called culpable knowledge, info only the killer would know. This is important because when detectives interview suspects, any small details they receive from the party being questioned that was not released to the public, this person shouldn't know these certain details, pointing to the possibility a suspect may have more involvement than they are admitting to. Police found evidence of not only financial issues in the Bevers household, but also marital problems. For example, a message sent to Missy on LinkedIn that investigators examined seemed familiar and flirtatious, suggesting that Missy may have had one or multiple affairs, and the same has been theorized about Brandon. One thing that could prove important to the case is what Brandon told police. He said he knew Missy was having an affair with a man named Kevin Cozine. Now, anytime there's a question of infidelity in a relationship, and someone in that circle winds up deceased from foul play, numerous additional suspects pop up immediately. To be a suspect in a murder case, law enforcement examines who has motive. If it is possible the victim had an affair, then not only the victim's spouse has a reason to be compelled to kill, but also the alleged person the victim was in a relationship with, as well as any other spouse or partner to that person. If what Brandon said to authorities was true about Missy having an affair, it could not only implicate himself, but multiple new suspects. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, it wasn't some woman in the tactical gear killing Missy. It was definitely a man. This is where opinions collide. Detectives from the Midlothian Police Department originally believed the killer to be a man, and then some pointed to the killer's unique gait, or way of walking, resembles a woman who might be wearing shoes too large for her feet. Many have theorized a jealous wife wearing her husband's boots was the culprit, while others have said the suspect looks too comfortable awaiting their target inside the church, walking at a slowed pace, knowing they have some time to kill before Missy Bevers would arrive. As of 2020, police still do not have a lock on whether the killer is a man or a woman. Essentially, it's 50-50. While the police have additional video of both the suspect and Missy inside the church, the public has only ever seen 2 minutes this of short the killer surveillance
walking
footage
around,
is really all we
damaging
have
windows
to help
and doors
identify
before
Missy
Missy
arrives in the parking lot.
And
And it didn't take long for viewers to establish similarities between the killer's unique gait and the gait of Missy's father-in-law, Randy Bevers. Here's a video of Brandon and his father walking into MPD for additional questioning when a dry cleaning business called police stating Randy dropped off 2 blood-stained shirts. Randy stated 2 family dogs got into a fight, and his wife's Chihuahua bled on both Randy and his wife's clothing.
It's a Chihuahua? Right, they got in a dog fight. That's all I'm going to say. I got to get some water, guy.
Police talked to the Bevers' primary vet and confirmed that he did in fact bring his dog in. And when forensics collected the shirts, they found that the blood was not human but rather animal in origin. Also, police have confirmed Randy Bevers was out of the state during the time of the murder. Although both father and son are not being looked at as suspects, it is quite a coincidence that they were both on trips and away from Texas during the murder. To many people, this could suggest the killer was aware of at least Brandon being out of town, and if Missy was targeted, having the husband away could present more of an opportunity to carry out the attack. Or it could suggest there is something more to the husband and father-in-law going out of town, possibly to have a solid alibi when they would inevitably be questioned by law enforcement. The second scenario would be likely a case of a hired hit, paying someone to kill the victim and being so far away from the scene the accomplices would never be charged with the crime. Now, I'm not saying I believe Brandon and Randy had any knowledge of what would happen to Missy, but we have to look at the case like a detective would. And if not for their solid alibis, it wouldn't be difficult to come to the assumption a husband who finds out his spouse is cheating on him could be compelled to have her killed. Many people have been murdered for a lot less. Now, since the police didn't have much to go on other than what little surveillance footage they had, investigators analyzed the video and initially told Brandon they believe the killer to be around 6 feet tall. This would point to the suspect being a man, as it is rather rare for a woman to be that tall. But here's where it all gets crazy. After additional analysis, the police narrowed down the suspect's height to a range between 5'7" and 5'9". Then they changed their approximation to range from 5'2" to 5'7". So the question is, how tall is this person really? First, the husband is told 6 feet, and 4 years later, the estimate is between 5'2" and 5'7". Why can't we get a more narrow margin? Apparently, most doors range from 6 feet 8 inches to 7 feet tall. I mean, you look at the footage, what would you estimate as the killer's height? If we could get a lock on an accurate height, this case may already be solved. I mean, the church still exists. How hard would it be for MPD or even the FBI to measure these doors and get a more accurate description of the suspect? So without having any idea how tall this person is, all we know for sure is the killer is of white complexion and has a distinct gait. News media covered this story with an extreme emphasis on the killer's gait, because what else did they really have to speculate on? During Missy's memorial held at Creekside Church, the press was filming and obviously covering the progression of the case. The church had hired extra security from another local church due to the volume of attention the area was getting because of the crime. One security guard was filmed patrolling the parking lot during the memorial. Notice what the camera operator is focusing on: the man's gait. When the public turned on their TVs and saw this footage, numerous calls started coming in asking the police to look into this man as a potential suspect. When authorities looked into it, they directed their focus on this man as a prime suspect. Bobby Wayne Henry, a former police officer and security guard at his local church. Henry was white in complexion, had a similar build, and walked with his right foot positioned outward, much like the suspect seen on surveillance footage. Now, if you're thinking authorities are really scraping the bottom of the barrel with this one, buckle up, because it's about to get very spooky. Looking into Bobby's past, police discovered not only was he once in law enforcement, more specifically, he was a tactical officer who wore similar gear to the clothing we can see on the killer. The reason Bobby Wayne wasn't still an officer of the law was because he actually got his peace officer license revoked. In 2003, his former mother-in-law claimed he sexually assaulted her while brandishing a firearm. The case never went to trial, and Bobby Wayne Henry ended up getting a deferred adjudication, which ultimately cost him his career as a police officer, but kept his criminal record clean with no convictions. Years earlier, he was actually charged with another sexual assault, this time from his stepsister. The alleged assault happened in a near identical way, brandishing a firearm and putting the gun to her head. This case would go to trial, and in a testimony from his stepmother, she alleged he once did the same thing to her. Even with the testimony, Henry was ultimately acquitted of the crime and once again maintained a clean record. Since I brought up the testimony of Henry's stepmother, I must also inform you that years prior, Bobby's best friend was apparently shot in the knee by Henry while the two were hunting, accidentally. Bobby's best friend almost died due to this. He lost nearly all of the blood in his body, and his friend had to have both legs shortened as a result of this. While Bobby Wayne Henry hasn't had the most glamorous past, it wasn't just these sexual assault claims that had police intrigued. Bobby is allegedly known to have a few tall tales that he has shared on more than one occasion. He's claimed he was a Navy SEAL. He was in fact a former member of the US Navy, but no evidence has ever been shown to prove he was a SEAL. Having been in the US military myself, stolen valor is not as uncommon as you think. I mean, you don't even need to be associated with law enforcement or the military to do something like this. Every day, millions of people on social media present a false persona or fake lifestyle for others to either envy or get a certain kind of reaction from. Bobby Wayne Henry allegedly also told of how an ex-girlfriend was killed in the line of duty, serving in either the Canadian military or while working as an undercover cop. Apparently, the girlfriend's occupation changed depending on who Bobby told the story to. Like the Navy SEAL experience, there is no evidence of this ever happening. However, one thing that we do know is factual is when a judge signed off on a search warrant for Henry's home in relation to the Missy Bevers case, they collected data on cell phones and computers, which ended up with police finding what they classify as child pornography. Henry was arrested and held in jail for around 70 days. Contrary to popular belief, he was not arrested in relation to the Bevers case, and at the conclusion of investigators looking at Bobby Wayne as a suspect, they ultimately moved on from him as a main focus. He did have an interesting alibi during the time of the murder, however. He said he woke up at 3 a.m. that morning to feed his newborn, while his wife was getting ready to work. Out of the three people we've talked about in this case, Bobby Wayne Henry admits he was awake during the time of Missy's attack. He wasn't out of the state like Brandon or Randy were proven to be, So it's just interesting how many things line up in this man's past to potentially be connected to this unsolved murder. Midlothian police and the FBI are not focused on any of these people as suspects at this time. So no matter what you believe is the truth, some information the authorities have that we don't must be pointing them in a certain direction. And the reason we as the public don't have more info is because law enforcement is holding their cards close to their chest. They only have one shot to convict the person they believe to be the killer. And to go to trial, prosecutors must show this person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. They likely have run out of hot leads in the case and are waiting for someone to give them information about the crime that hasn't been released to the public, aka culpable knowledge, implicating that person as having involvement with the murder. Regardless though, it's been years now and this case is still unsolved.